I'd like to introduce Dr. McNab. Dr. McNab gained an undergraduate degree in biology with a minor in chemistry from Park University in Parkville, Missouri. Then became a Doctor of Osteopathic Medicine from Kansas City University of Medicine and Biosciences. Today, Dr. McNab is the Director of Medical Education and the Program Director of Internal Medicine for the Freeman Health System. His previous work positions include being an emergency med technician, a trauma team technician in a level 1 trauma center, as well as working in a resource utilization committee for St. Luke's Hospital in Kansas City, Missouri. He was also the chief resident of internal medicine, involved in the residency administration and scheduling, the medical education committee at KCUMB, and academic steering committee also at KCUMB. Later, his work included managing 2 level 2 trauma hospitals with open ICU experience, as well as working on quality review committees, computer process and implementation committee, and the physician advisory committee for Gates Hospitalists. Now, if you could please mute your mics and use the raise your hand function, it would be much appreciated. Take it away, Dr. McNab.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all for having me. Let me get this set up for us and we will get going. So just need to figure out how to share my screen. There we go. And then get back to our lecture for the day. Okay. So I'm under the impression you all can see the presentation. Am I right?
No.
No. Okay. Well, let me try again then. So we'll get out of that. And we'll go to screen share. So it looks like my entire screen.
You gotta click on the screen.
Okay, share it. Yeah. I guess it's a good thing I went to medical school because my IT ability is fairly limited. All right, how about now?
It's working.
Oh, fantastic. Well, very good. Well, thank you guys for having me out. This is a topic that I'm really passionate about. And I suspect that if you're like me, this might be some material that you probably have not really looked at as much as you probably should have throughout the entirety of most of our careers. So hopefully it'll be a good learning environment for all of us. So I don't have any financial issues to disclose. A little bit about myself. I grew up on a dairy farm in a town of about 400. I am a board-certified internal medicine doctor. I'm the vice president of medical education for Freeman. I am the program director of internal medicine for that program as well. I'm a avid but mediocre musician, and I have a real passion for history and health. So a little bit about myself. So this is a picture of my family era, 1977. And I thought I'd share it with you because I think that it will provide a little context for why I wanted to give this topic a good review with everybody. So, of course, this handsome devil is myself. The guy with the need for a haircut was my father. And so little sister, mom, brother, older brother. And then, of course, there's another little brother missing who won't come along for a number of years. And so in 1977, these are some pretty healthy people. But that was not to last. By the time this guy's 40, his blood pressure and cholesterol culminated in the beginning of a long and distinguished career of recurrent heart attacks. That's no good. My little sister has got some blood pressure problems. My mom would go on to be a type 2 diabetic later in life. This guy here would develop insulin-dependent diabetes by about the age of 7 or 8. And he would pass away by the time he was 31. My little brother, who's not seen here in the photo, would also become an insulin-dependent diabetic, and he's doing fairly well, but all the things that you can think of that go along with being an insulin-dependent diabetic are with him. And then this handsome devil, myself, chubby cheeks and all, I would go on to develop insulin resistance and some cholesterol problems. And so my point is that healthcare issues and maybe poor protoplasm, for the lack of a better term, are certainly part of my genetic milieu. And in my journey to not live the fates of my fathers and my brothers have kind of led me on a journey of discovery that I think hopefully will be very impactful for all of us. So when we think about healthcare in America, I don't know if everybody shares this view or not, but I've heard it from too many patients to count. Healthcare in America has something to do with this pile of pills. It's almost as if we have discovered that healthcare problems seem to be some sort of pill deficiency syndrome, and if we can just get enough pills, the right combination of pills, then quote-unquote health will be maintained. And that, after being in practice since 2005, I will say that a lot of my time has been spent as a physician thinking about the applications of medications and interventions and stenting and this sort of thing. And I've definitely had this said to me multiple times. I almost think of, like, if you really want to insult your physician, I think that guy's a pill pusher. I think that really sums it up. I think that it really is dissatisfying for our patients as well. So most of this conversation really started for me about 5 or 6 years ago when I was at a medical conference, and I'm talking with a physician from Mayo, and he just drops this bomb on me. The impacts of all of our medical interventions and all those pills on people's overall health is probably really about 10 to 15%. And of course, the impact of a healthy lifestyle is 40 to 50%. And for me, it falls under the category of an epiphany. It just had never really stood out. It wasn't emphasized in medical school. It was nothing I really deliberately ever thought about. But what this guy was saying was, do we really have the ability to out-medicate a toxic lifestyle? And his impression was no. And so that kind of started me down the path. And so when you think about really what is the milieu that makes good health, I'm going to try to make the argument for us today that health looks like this: the right nutrition, keeping your cholesterol under control, a good lifestyle full of physical activity, controlling our weight, getting a goodly amount of sleep, avoiding toxins. And then maybe this 10 or 15% piece, which might be some medications or interventions with our healthcare team to really be able to clean things up. And I think that probably is the correct recipe that we ought to be endorsing for ourselves, our loved ones, and our patients. But here's what I see happening. Most of the patients that I've had the pleasure to work with throughout the years are missing all of this. They've engaged in what I'm going to describe as a pretty toxic lifestyle. They have no deliberate plan for their health whatsoever. Physical activity, their diet, these things actually seem to me almost like deliberately designed to really destroy your body as fast as humanly possible. But then we're banking all of our hopes on this little 10 to 15% piece, which is, hey, can the healthcare provider bail me out of this bad lifestyle that I've engaged in? And so, if this model was a house, here's your roof, there's no walls and there's no foundation, and everybody would look at that situation and say, well, this seems like a non-starter to me. But for some reason, we don't stop to really consider our healthcare decisions at this level. And I think that it's allowed us to really avoid a conversation. So if you look at the CDC stats from 2019, we still have about 2.6 million deaths per year, every year. Probably with COVID, it'll be a little bit higher this year. And when you look at the top 3 causes, they're heart disease, cancer, and chronic respiratory disease. And these 3 diseases account for about 50% of all the deaths that Americans are going to experience this year. If you add just one more disease, diabetes, to that, which is the number 7 killer of human beings, so just those 4 diseases, that increases our total to about 80% of the explanation for every one of these 2.6 million deaths, okay? And the reason why I point this out, heart disease, cancer, chronic respiratory disease, diabetes, the thing that these things all have in common is that in a lot of ways, they're completely manipulable and avoidable to a greater degree, not 100%, I won't make that argument, but a lot of the risk of those diseases can be pretty easily mitigated with a really short list of things that we could do or avoid to make that difference. Not smoking, the diet and activity, too much alcohol, don't control your blood pressure, don't fix your cholesterol. So we have tools to address every single one of those things. So we have the tools that we need to make a really significant impact on 80% of 2.6 million deaths every year. You know, and I think that that's a real take-home point for us. And when we don't address these things, then these healthcare problems really become self-inflicted. We could have avoided them, we chose not to. So I love this slide. So this is from Lancet 2004, the InterHeart study, which is a humongous study, really looking worldwide, 52 countries involved, at the potentially modifiable risk factors associated with myocardial infarctions. And I wanted to point something out to you because I think that a lot of this slide is probably kind of a no-brainer for most of us, but I think there's a real zinger here for us as well. So the biggest piece of the pie here is this yellow slide said, yep, there's our cholesterol. Don't fix that. We're going to get heart attacks. Makes perfectly good sense to us. And this guy up here, it looks like the next big one, smoking. Okay, I don't think that there's any epiphanies there. Look at this guy here. What's this little tan checkery one? Psychosocial problems. So psychosocial issues are the third largest modifiable risk factor for coronary artery disease. Is your depression under control? Are you a wildly manic bipolar? Are you socially isolated? This has a bigger impact on people's overall mortality than, look at this, hypertension. It's bigger. Look at this guy down here. Diabetes is this guy right here. No, diabetes is this guy right here. Yeah, so, you know, so for me, when I look at this side, I start to take note that, wow, if I'm ignoring the mental health of my patients, I am really missing the ball on helping them avoid a heart attack. Talk about a holistic osteopathic view of disease process. Absolutely floors me. So this is from JAMA 2004. So this study looked at people that had made it to the age of 50 without having a heart attack. Okay, so those lucky guys and gals who made it to 50, they're doing okay. And so the question was, what are the chances that they will have a heart attack in their lifetime? Well, if you've optimized your risk factors and you've made it to 50 with no heart attack, you're a man. If you're doing your part of the bargain, there's only a 5% chance that you'll ever have a heart attack in your entire life. You know, growing up with my father, growing up in Missouri, as a physician, I was under the impression that coronary artery disease is ubiquitous and it's just part of the deal and we're all going to get it and hey, there you go. But this study suggests that when we do what we need to do, there's a really small chance that you'll have a lifetime heart attack. Ladies, if they've made it this far and they're doing due diligence to their health, they do pretty well too. Only an 8% chance of a heart attack in their entire lifetime. So I think that that's pretty good information. But look what happens as we add major risk factors. Wow, we lose ground really quickly. The numbers really start to skyrocket. And I think that that's a major take-home point. So doing due diligence to a good, healthy lifestyle can add up to 10 years to your life expectancy, lowers your risk of cardiovascular disease all the way up to about 85%. And of course, I think this is kind of a duplicate. You know, having more life and lowering your mortality seem to be kind of two sides of the same coin as far as I'm concerned. But still, I think that this study was very impactful for really looking at the topic that we want to go over today. So this is the data from 2016 looking at overall, if we're going to give grade cards to every state, hey, how's Missouri doing? Well, here's the United States in aggregate, so we're going to call that our median for the entire country. And down here, in about the start of the bottom quartile of this whole fiasco, is Missouri, which is really good news. What that says is, wow, we've got some real opportunities for improvement, so lucky us. So why do we get such a bad grade? Well, in Missouri, almost 20% of us manifest trouble drinking. Drinking is a problem for a lot of us. So 20%, 1 in 5 Missouri citizens, that's an issue. That's a lot of them. Here's some good news from smoking. You can see the trends are going downward over time, and that is fantastic. I cannot say enough about that. The problem that I have with this slide is that the bottom line represents the average of the United States, and this line that parallels it is Missouri. So even though we are trending downward, we're still at higher rates than the United States in aggregate. So we could be doing a better job. We want to be below the average, not the average, and certainly not where we are currently. So smoking, still got work to do. U.S. obesity, this is no news to any of us here, but obesity is a tremendous part of our problem. And I think that this is a really interesting slide because in 1990, when I was first starting to work towards a career in healthcare, about 1 in 10 American citizens met the criteria for obesity. 1 in 10, maybe 1 in 11, I guess depends on where that dot really is. But by the time we get to 2016, 1 in 10 becomes 1 in 3. So this is a problem that's in evolution. It's getting worse and worse and worse. And it's something that we've not effectively addressed, and it is very impactful. So as you can see here in Missouri, we're not the worst, but more than that 1 in 3, we're definitely part of that equation. And on the off chance that anybody in the audience is of the opinion that being overweight and obesity is really an aesthetic, cosmetic lifestyle choice and is really not a health issue, then I would like to share some data with you. Here's a nice study that maps out as your BMI goes up, your mortality rate goes up in male and female populations. So they are correlated very well. Obesity has a direct link to cancer risks. These studies were looking at, this is kind of an interesting study actually, looking at incremental increases in relative risk of these cancers based upon incremental increases in your weight, okay? So for every 5 kilos over a normal weight that your patient or your family member or you go up, you're increasing your chance of breast cancer by a relative risk of 1.12, which, that's about 12 pounds. So, that's interesting and very much is correlated across multiple common types of cancer. Look at this one though, colorectal cancer. For every 1 kilo over ideal body weight, your relative risk of getting colon cancer is going up. That's 2.2 pounds. So for every couple pounds you gain, your risk of colorectal cancer is going up. And for anybody who's ever been an adult in Missouri, we all know from about the time you graduate high school, you start collecting a pound or 2 every year to year and a half on average, and that's pretty common in our culture. So, but we need to know our risks are, where our exposure to risk, it climbs as obesity climbs. Diabetes has a very tight correlation between BMI and risk of diabetes, especially in the female population. Sorry, ladies. And then pretty well documented correlation between increasing BMI and our risk of hypertension. And hypertension is extremely prevalent. 50% of the population of adults in the United States will be troubled by blood pressure issues during the course of their life. So when you look at all of that, these things that are not going well for us, and you start to look at its overall impact on our life, there's some sad news. You know, this is a slide from 2015, and even in 2015, the United States was nowhere near the top of the pack for life expectancy. We're getting whooped by pretty much every industrialized nation on the planet in 2015, and those numbers have not gotten better. And this year is the third year in a row where lifespans have decreased. Before the past 3 years, we were actually seeing a slow and steady increase. You would live a little bit longer than your forebears, and that was pretty cool. We seem to have hit a tipping point where we're not able to medicate our way out of this. Now life expectancies are going back down again. So what we had in the past, we don't have now. So something's definitely gone wrong that we need to address. And for all of those problems and that decreasing life expectancy, look at the costs. So this is also a 2015 report looking at how much are we paying in terms of GDP. They're talking about 16% of overall GDP, which, you know, newer numbers in 2019 is putting us a little bit over 17% of gross domestic product. We spend a lot of money on healthcare, so that decreasing lifespan, all of those other health issues, we're paying a premium dollar to get those really, really poor results. And when you compare what we're spending compared to most of the other industrialized nations, wow, we are throwing tremendous money at that. And if you guys are not GDP people, I get that. Let me put it to you another way. In 2000, we were spending almost $1.5 trillion per year in healthcare costs. And by 2017, we're up to around $3.5 trillion per year in healthcare costs. So in all that time, we're throwing trillions and trillions of dollars at these problems, and we're just really getting suboptimal results. So I feel like extra money is not the answer. I feel like the approach that we're taking to healthcare is not getting us where we need to be. So I'm trying to open our eyes to the idea that we should not be satisfied with where we are. And also, if you're wondering where all those $3.5 trillion come from, well, hey, lucky us, they come from us. So as we age, our exposure to healthcare costs are only going up. And so if you're in this pocket where these are all fixed income people primarily, right? These people are living on their retirement. Is that where we really want to be trying to figure out where to come up with an extra $30,000 or $40,000 in healthcare expenses? I think this is a real tremendous burden to the citizens of this country. All right. Moving on, let's stop talking about dollars. I don't want to get too focused on money here. We're healthcare providers after all. So this is a grade card looking at U.S. trends, and this is interesting. So these are men, these are women. We're looking at smoking, healthy diet, physical activity, BMI, diabetes, cholesterol, blood pressure. And so this line, if it's a little fuzzy for you, this is like what they saw in 2005 or 6. This is what they projected where we would be in 2020 now. And then this is where we got to, okay? So green is ideal, yellow's meh, not the best, not the worst, and red is just a disaster. This is bad stuff. So let's just look at smoking. We're not going to look at all of these. So what it says here is that we projected that, you know, the vast majority of us would be doing a pretty good job, 70-ish% would be doing a good job of smoking cessation. And, you know, we got this little bit of tail here, and we actually exceeded that. We did way better than we thought that we would. And I think that really follows that national trend. Smoking is down. But that was just the warm up. I only showed you that so you would understand how this system works. Let's look at healthy diets. So in 2006, there's not even that much meh intermediate. There was just, oh my God, you people have the worst diet of all time. and look at how you almost have to imagine the percentage of people that this is the American Heart Association data, by the way, that they said I was actually on a reasonable, heart healthy diet, that this was optimal for health. That little green line is almost imaginary, right? But we predicted that here's where we would be by 2020, and here's where we are. So we got a little bit more intermediate than we've got god awfully bad, but still we have almost a hallucinatory percentage of people who are anywhere close to a reasonable diet. And again, this is all from 2019 American Heart Association. So if you don't like this data, take it up with your cardiologist. So for me, this is the most important thing on this slide is, oh my God, garbage in, garbage out, you are what you eat. What are we doing to our bodies? And it's not just us, ladies. Y'all are to blame as well. There's a lot, but again, from an optimistic standpoint, it looks to me like many opportunities for improvement. Physical activity is not doing too bad. BMI is a big problem, and we already discussed that. I really wanted you to see this slide to really understand how bad our overall nutrition in this country really is. So let's shift gears a little bit. So hopefully this slide makes sense to all of us. You know, I think I was brought up with the idea that there was this arc of human life expectancy, that you were born, you slowly made your way to maturation, you kind of hit a tipping point where you started to age and fall apart, then you just got super old, and then you passed away. And that's just kind of what happens. It's a foregone conclusion, and that's just how it is. Deal with it. And so I really endorsed this for a long time, and it just made sense because most of the population I work with as an adult physician, super elderly, wow, they're all in nursing homes and rockers, and they can't use their limbs and their organs are shutting down. So I've seen a lot of things that say, well, this seems like a reasonable proposition. But over time, my mind has started to change. So both of these vehicles have something in common. They're both 1951 Jeep Willys. This one is in mint condition. It's beautiful. I have one, not quite as nice as this, but pretty nice. This is a gorgeous vehicle. And this poor, sad sack of rust is just at the end of its lifespan. It is just dead. And is it dead because the Jeep has a lifespan? Or is it just simple neglect? Is there a chance that what we've been thinking of as this life cycle of we all fall apart and we all die, and the last 15 or 20 years of our life are fraught with organ disease and debility? Is that really the case? Or is it perhaps that what we're mistaking for old age and frailty is really just neglect?
Dr. McNab?
Yeah.
There's a question. Bucky?
Oh, I don't see any questions show up here. So if you'll just keep reminding me if that happens, because I don't see any questions.
What's the moderator. Bucky, you had a question?
I need to unmute. Okay. Good afternoon, Dr. McNab. Thank you for the presentation. I have a question about this food culture in the United States. Well, that's very true. But where for example, our health communities, doctors mostly knowledgeable and educated, and that they are, for example, fighting against the certain food additives. For example, high fructose corn syrup. Why do we have all the time in every thing that what we purchase high fructose corn syrup? We know that it's very bad. Where this medical community in general are in the place of educating or even struggling against the regulatory commissions like an FDA, that okay, these are, why we should just add it. I don't know, it's correct time to say that ban it, but at least that, making, the more tight.
Oh, absolutely. So I think that really gets to the gist of why we are having this conversation today. And I would point out that it's my belief that the reason why you don't see that advice and that fight and the healthcare community really stepping up to endorse that is because I think there's a lot of resistance on a lot of different levels. I think if you're in the cereal business, you're going to lobby pretty hard to make sure that corn syrup is a pretty cool deal, and I think that when you look at even like funding to medical schools and universities and who keeps those things afloat, well, it's industry frequently. And so if you have a policy that flies in the face of what's best for industry, well, boy, your funding can dry up in a big hurry. There are a lot of conversation going on about these things, and there are new board certifications for physicians like lifestyle medicine. So in November, I'll be sitting for a board certification in lifestyle medicine, which is in great part reflects the values that I'm sharing with you guys today and the data and why we should approach our patients like this. But if you think about it, a lot of the things that physicians get reimbursed for are at a service level. If you sell somebody a stent or a colonoscopy or this or that, those are monetizable things. But, insurance industries at large have really put some real disincentivizations in place that have had to be overcome to make that a business. If a physician goes broke and starves and can't feed their family because what they're selling is good advice and that can't be purchased, well, that gets in the way of this. And so I think that the pharmaceutical industry has a real dog in this game to make sure that physicians really know which pill to sell their patients. But wow, to this point, having somebody sit down and spend 40 minutes to say, let's talk about cheeseburgers and french fries and how that's actually murdering you and why you need that 7th stent. There's a lot that needs to happen to make that a sustainable profession. But I think that once you start looking into this, as I have, I think you're going to be really excited because there is a real groundswell. There is a lot of physicians who are changing their careers. To this point, I think this is the 3rd or 4th year of certification for lifestyle medicine. And at this point, I think there's about 2,500 to 3,000 certificate holders. So I think we're starting to build up this idea of here's the right way to address health. But thank you for asking the question because it's right on point. Okay, I want to move on a little bit. And I really want you to look at this slide because, man, this is a fantastic slide, again, provided last year by the American Heart Association. And so on the y-axis, we're looking at your incidence rate of coronary artery disease. On the x-axis, we are looking at the number of ideal health behaviors. Hey, does McNab exercise? Does he get a good enough sleep? Does he got good nutrition? Is he socially locked in and have good relationships? That's what they're measuring here. On this side, they're kind of looking at your protoplasm, high blood pressure, dysmetabolic, diabetes, all that good stuff. And so I want to use myself as a model to help us understand how to look at this slide. So as I said, because of my poor choices in family, my genetics are a little bit against me. And so I've got some insulin resistance and some cholesterol issues. And so that would put me, depends on how you want to count that, somewhere between here and here. So, I have some problems. I'm not the healthiest person. I'm not the sickest person. So somewhere around here. But here's the thing to know about me. My diet is maximally perfect. I exercise a lot. I'm rigorous with my sleep. I have deliberately manufactured a lifestyle to optimize my health behaviors because I don't want to suffer the fate of my forebears. And so I have minimized my risk to somewhere between here and here. That's the best that I'm going to be able to do with my genetics. But now let's take an imaginary genetically perfect human being, okay? They have all the ideal risk factors. They're genetically superior human beings, probably grown in a lab somewhere, probably. And if they have perfect genes and a perfect lifestyle, man, their risk is negligible. But what if they were born in the United States and they like steak and cigarettes and booze and exercises for for other people, look what happens to their overall risk, right? So genetically perfect with all the bad habits causes this to happen. Well, here's me. My genes aren't that great, but I'm working my butt off to take care of myself. So according to the American Heart Association, even if we are not genetically gifted, we just got some poor protoplasm we just have to deal with, our lifestyle decisions are going to probably be tremendously more impactful than our genes on whether we end up with coronary artery disease or not. So for me, when I look at this slide, what it says is, hey, buddy, the ball's in your court. Do you want that stent? Do you want that stroke? Or would you rather avoid all of that? The power is with the patient. And I really think that when people start to grasp how you can modify your risks for good or for bad, I think that being self-empowered is the most important thing that we can do for our patients. So very cool slide. I really like this a lot. So in a sense, what I'm trying to say, guys, is I feel like what we call healthcare, that what comes to your mind, those pills, those stents, the doctors, the subconsultants, yada, yada, we call that healthcare, but I call that sick care. We don't do anything to fix your metabolic milieu or your lifestyle. And then when you have a heart attack or a stroke or cancer or diabetes or what have you, then we start to perform medical care to kind of palliate that disease process as slow as we can until you die, right? Well, that's not healthcare. That's disease management. Why aren't we doing what we should to avoid diseases in the first place? And I think that we need to call this sick care or palliative care. It's not health care, in my opinion, whatsoever. So I feel like that name has got to be changed, because I want to talk about what real health care is. And I would just like to point out these two people to you. As you can see, they're not 20. This gentleman at the time of this photo is 72, and his training partner here is 68. So if that life cycle arc that I showed you guys, where it's just inevitable past the age of 30, y'all are going to fall apart and explode by the time you're 60 or 70. Why is it that there's examples, lots of examples of people who just never got that message? Why do these people not know they need to sit down in rocking chairs? And by God, I would be happy to have the physique of either of these people. I mean, if I could have this lady's muscles, sign me up. So I don't think that age is our enemy. I think that healthcare neglect and not understanding what real healthcare is the issue. Having said all that, if you guys are intrigued or you're convinced, I'd like to take this conversation a little bit further. So let's look at what, according to Dr. McNab, what does real healthcare actually look like? Well, we're going to look at the exercise first, because I think it's very impactful. So if you ever remember this movie, WALL-E, from 2008, I thought the Pixar guys were just hilarious in picking on human beings with this idea that, human beings were slowly losing the ability to walk, and they would just kind of float around with their tech. And, this is 2008, of course. And I look around these days and I'm like, man, those Pixar people, they were prescient. This looks right to me. So I think the American Heart Association agrees with that too, because from 98 to 2016, these are overall trends in the United States of physical activity, and that line is clearly going downwards. I don't know that AHA thinks we're losing the ability to walk or not, but it's a use it or lose it world, and we're definitely not using it the way that we did, so we probably are losing it to some degree. So let's look at exercise and its role in primary prevention. And for those of you guys who maybe are not that familiar with primary prevention is what we want. It is the ideal of stopping you from getting a disease. Secondary prevention means disease modification. Once you have the heart attack, what can we do to make the best of that situation? So I'm going to talk about disease prevention here for a second. So this is a study from the UK, and they looked at the impacts on exercise on multiple diseases, and they ranked the impact. And I want to just for a second, just focus us here on what did they mean by exercise. So this was their definition: exercise for 30 minutes, 5 times a week, basically at the level of taking a walk. You walking the dog, you grabbing your partner in life by the hand and going on that love stroll for 30 minutes. So we're not talking hours at the gym, pumping iron, killing yourself, spandex. We're talking about taking a walk 5 days a week for a half an hour. Well, what do you get for all this 30-minute exercises? Well, right out of the gate, all-cause mortality seems to drop by about 30%, just taking the walk. Heart disease is cut by 40%. Blood pressure cut by 50%. And I think 50%. Stroke, the thing that I'm the most afraid of, cut by 30%. That risk of that diabetes that I really don't want to have, cut by 50%. Cancer, we'll talk about that. Breast cancer risks are cut. Bowel cancers are tremendously cut. Depression goes down. Dementia goes down. I don't know about you guys. I am desperately afraid of dementia. I'll do anything to avoid either a stroke or dementia. I need this thing between my ears to function optimally, or I don't want any part of it. Even things like arthritis and osteoporosis, falls in the elderly, which of course that leads to fractures and increasing mortality. All of these things go down because you invested, or your patients invested, 30 minutes, 5 days a week to take a walk. So if I had a pill, if I could market a pill that would do all of these things just by popping a pill once or twice a day, I feel like I would generate enough revenue to probably buy New Zealand, at which point I'd move there. I'd probably live there alone, avoid people.
Dr.
But I
McNab,
think this would be a moneymaker. What do you got?
we have another question.
Go for it.
Bucky?
Hi. It's great. I just wanted to share with the community that in University of Kansas Medical Center, Alzheimer's Disease Center has actually a program, exercise program for the Alzheimer patients and then the pre-demented patients. So they actually conducted several studies and then are published. It is a direct correlation between the regular exercise, as you mentioned, just the 30 minutes and every day 5 times, or maybe a couple of times in a week. It's a great impact on the incidence of the moving from dementia to Alzheimer's disease. So there is a direct link, actually.
I absolutely agree with that. And, and I think that the thing is that for a lot of people, they don't have a passion to exercise. They get no joy from feeling sore or beating themselves mercilessly at the gym. I understand that. But when you understand that what we're talking about is an active lifestyle, you just engaging in an active, moderate lifestyle, that bar is set so low for us to reap all of those benefits of dementia avoidance, these diseases that nobody wants. It's so attainable, but because it's couched by these terms of, oh, this is exercise, people find it a little repellent. And I think that they just need to understand that, boy, you don't have to reach for the gold ring. The gold ring is like right there, at shoulder height, and you just have to extend out your hand and take the darn thing. So very impactful.
We have another question from student Dr. Jordan. Jordan?
All right.
Yeah, hi. My question is, all these numbers are very impressive, but like you were saying, some people get turned off by the idea of exercise, and that can be exacerbated by people with previous morbidities like diabetes and obesity and things like that, or having had a heart attack. And are the numbers similar for people who have had these adverse scenarios in their lives, but then decide to make these changes and it works for them as well?
So, when you put somebody in the audience and you pay them to ask a question, that's called like being a professional shill or something like that. So I think that the student doctor was a great setup and segue to a conversation about ultimately what he's asking is, well, what about secondary prevention? Once the cows are out of the barn, is it too late or is there some benefit? And I think that is an exciting question, because I think a lot of times people who do suffer from chronic disease say, well, it's too late for me. Why should I try? So this also comes from the British Medical Journal and looks at secondary disease management. And I think will help answer your question. So for those of you who are not the master of the forest plot, of course, anything on this side of this line means it's not going to be a benefit to your healthcare problem. And anything on this side of the line is going to make a positive impact on disease. So when you look at exercise and secondary disease management, here's what I want to point out to you, that when you look at, when all the young medical students, boy, they're learning so much about statins and beta blockers and ACE inhibitors and antiplatelets and Plavix and Effient and all these good medicines for all my heart attack patients. Yeah, you should do those things. Look, they're good. Here's exercise. Not statistically much different in impact, right? So the things that we're going to sell you, I'm going to sell you about $150 worth of pills to help you with your disease process. Exercise has a tremendous impact on secondary disease management. In fact, look at this. For strokes, that thing that Dr. McNab fears more than life itself, here's anticoagulants, probably not a great idea for most of that. Here's antiplatelets, kind of helpful. Here's exercise. What's better? Tell your patient, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry you had a stroke. You really need to take that 30-minute dog walk every day, or take your darn platelet. Well, I would say you need to do both. But oh my gosh, look how impactful exercise is in secondary prevention. This is, and if you're not writing this on a prescription pad for your patients, if you're not educating your patients on the amazing benefits of secondary disease management, then you've left a large amount of ammunition still in your gun belt that really could have made a major difference to your patients. So in short, doctor, yes, secondary prevention is significantly impacted by the use of low-grade exercise continuously. And I want to say that this study came out in 2013. So none of this is even particularly new information. We just haven't talked about it enough. So the bottom line here is that we're going to talk about secondary prevention, that exercise and many drug interventions that we use for very common and serious health problems are really potentially similar in terms of effect on overall mortality benefits. So especially as regards heart disease, stroke, heart failure, diabetes, we go back to that first slide. What are the things that are going to kill the 2.6 million of our friends and family? So I want to introduce you to somebody that I've never met. This gentleman is George Jedinoff. This picture was taken in 2017. And I just point to George because in this picture, George is 100 years old. He just failed to get the message that because you're 100, you're crippled, invalid, demented in a nursing home, not living your life. George has a robust health at 100, and he's living the life that he wants to. And I think that to me is a message worth sharing. This lady, I don't know what her name is, but I know that at the time this picture was taken, she was 69. And I want you to all get out there and poll every 18 to 40-year-old woman and ask them if they would trade abs with this lady. My answer is they probably would trade abs. So I don't think that age is this lady's problem. And then just to seal the deal, because I know what a lot of people are going to say when you start to talk to them about this, they're going to say, it's too late. I'm too old. I'm too far gone. I cannot be helped. I'm just going to sit here and do nothing. And when that happens, if you're one of those people or you're helping a patient who has that mindset, then I want you to sick this guy on them, Charles Eugster, who is my hero. So Charles lived that life. He was a UK dentist, which is weird because look how bad his teeth are. But he retired in his 60s. He was never an exercise buff. He couldn't have cared less. And then somewhere around 80, he looked in the mirror and said, oh my God, I hate everything about me. I hate my body. I hate how I feel. I hate my life. It's either die or do something. And so what he did was he started to live a healthy life. He started to train. He started to exercise. And before you know it, despite the fact that he had waited 80 years to start his health journey, somehow the guy ends up being a world master competitor in running, and actually got like, these are his 5 gold medals. And here he is water skiing, which I'll be honest with you, I'm 49. I just don't have the ankles for this. How this guy's able to water ski and I can't is infuriating. But my point is that for our patients who say, it's too late, the boat is, the water's under the bridge, I couldn't possibly benefit from any of those things, I would say Charles Juxter proves the point that it's never too late to have a healthy lifestyle impact your overall health. And I love this. Here's my quote from Charles. You see, the stupid thing is that people just don't realize that you can have a beach body at 90 and turn the heads of the sexy 70-year-old girls on the beach. Because I'm living proof of that. If you eat right, exercise properly, you can be that guy at any age. And I really think that really sums it up pretty well.
Dr. McNab, we have a question. Dr. Talley.
Yeah, Dr. McNab, I absolutely agree with what you're saying. One problem that comes to mind, when I took my son to law school, I found law school was in the middle of a food desert. And there were no grocery stores, there were no fresh vegetables. The only thing that was available to him, and he didn't have a car, was fast food stuff. And of course, you know what happened. He gained weight. My question to you is this. How do you address environmental factors that prevent healthy behaviors? How do you stand on that?
Oh, absolutely. You know, I think that you're asking a socioeconomical question. There is a real thought process that being able to eat healthy is unobtainable because it just costs too much. You know, it's just not feasible. You know, and I agree. If your only source of nutrition is what you can buy out of a gas station, well, that's going to be pretty impactful on your choices. And I think that to a greater degree is a societal issue that needs to be, it's a much bigger issue. But I think that even when I walk into a gas station, what I eat, an apple, and every gas station I've been into always has that basket of sketchy looking apples and bananas. I don't eat anything else in there. I try to avoid eating out of gas stations, but even in gas stations, there are better choices and there are worse choices. And I think that the more times that we can make a good decision, and if we can't, can we make a better decision? I don't feel like we live in an all or none environment here where if I can't do it perfectly, I should not attempt anything at all. And so I really think that keeping in mind that if you can't get out of a food desert, if you can't adjust, you know, your budget, you know, I think that really sitting down and being thoughtful about what your goal is. And to be honest with you, I find that when I start to talk to people about what do you eat? Why do you eat it? What was the goal? They look at me like I'm from Mars. They're like, I am. What do you mean? Why am I eating it? I'm eating it because I'm hungry and I like it. And you're like, cool. What does it do to your health? You know, did you pick that food choice because you thought that was my healthiest choice? You know, there's almost always an opportunity there to make even a slightly better choice. And so I almost feel like on some level that's kind of a cop-out answer to your question, but I really think that with what we have, that's probably the best answer I'd be able to really posit. And we're going to get to some more of those questions here in a minute. So to sum up and finalize my thoughts on just this exercise thing, here's my prescription. So here's what I do. I do about 90 minutes of weightlifting or cardio 6 days per week. I take 1 day off a week. And I do this all with my wife. We have a built-in lifestyle to engage in these things. And it works for us. But what do I think other people should do? Here's what I recommend. I really think to just get the benefits of an active lifestyle, that 30 minutes a day of light walking, little light cardio, 5 days per week is an achievable thing. And even if you can't do 30 minutes to start, I bet you could do 2 minutes and then 5 minutes and then 15 minutes and work your way up. Now, if you just want all those benefits of the reduction of disease process, this will do that for you. If you want to have the sexiest abs and the beach body, then you probably need to do this. But that's about aesthetics. That's not about health. There's lots of people, there's a lot of those bodybuilders that are not terribly healthy. So don't let big muscles make you think that health is involved. That's not necessarily the case. If you want good health and more importantly, good cardiovascular health, here's really what you need to make your goal. And that for almost everybody should be achievable one way or the other. Okay, but hey, you guys want to talk about diet? Let's talk about diet. Let's do this thing. So you are what you eat, right? So if you go back to my buddy, the American Heart Association, looking at impacts of diet on disease and mortality, when you look at mortality attributable to overall suboptimal diet, I'm going to call that crappy diet, what you can see is that the biggest impact is on your heart. So all these other little subcategories of disease are impacted by a bad diet. But if you want a way to wreck your heart, here's how you do it. You just eat at McDonald's every day. That'll definitely do you. And then on this side is what's the impact of the cardiometabolic mortality on the diet? Well, overall, about 45% impact on whether you live or die. So I think that the choices of what you put on your plate next are really pretty impactful, according to the AHA, and I think I agree with them. And when you look at plasma cholesterol levels as a marker of coronary risk, what we see is a steady, continuous upward trend in risk for cholesterol values that go high. And, we always kind of think of 200 as that, oh, hey, man, you really ought to do something about that. But mortality rates are rising from 150 to 200. So if you're only interested in staying below 200, have you left some health change on the table? I think the answer is probably yes. Maybe based on your risk factors or my risk factors, I should probably do better than that. But there definitely is a strong correlation there. And I think you guys will find this fascinating. So this is from the World Health Organization, looking at different places on the planet, looking at cholesterol between men and women in both sexes. And as you can see, Americans and Europeans tend to have the highest cholesterols compared to African nations, Asian nations. I think this is, I don't know where that is. Anybody know what WPR is? I don't know what that is. That's not really the point of this slide anyway. What I want to show you is this slide right here. So look what happens when you go from dirt poor to really rich. Man, your cholesterol goes up. There's something about that money that just really is atherogenic, I suppose. Just having $20 bills really makes your cholesterol go up. Or it may be the case that when you can afford more, and I'm going to do some air quotes here, good food, maybe your cholesterol levels are impacted by what you're eating. And so this trend is pretty reproducible as people go from a more plant-based diet to a very heavy processed and meat-based diet. Cholesterol levels spike, which is too bad because I think the last slide said that's not a great idea. So our original health diet was this thing called the DASH diet, and it recommended in decreasing proportions. And this came out, I think DASH diet has been out since the late 80s or early 90s, so not new information at all. Lots of grains, lots of fruits and vegetables, a little fish, some leaner meats, and then look up here, like steak, ice cream, treats, that sort of stuff. Monthly. I believe that word is monthly. Like, hey, should we go out for a steak? Yes, maybe about once a month. That must have been a typo where they meant to do it every day, but somehow they made it monthly. So even like in the late 80s and early 90s, my point is that we knew that these foods were not particularly good for us from a cardiovascular standpoint. The thing that got in the way of the DASH diet is it really is at cross purposes of a lot of food industries and what we're taught. So we know this, but we very rarely ever emphasize it to our patients or our loved ones. This is the Mediterranean diet pyramid, and as you can see, they go crazy on the veggies, fruits, and grains. They love the fish, much lighter on the cheeses and the meats, and then negligible amounts of red meat and sweets. And of course, because it's Mediterranean, you have to have lots of wine and lots of dancing. So I definitely think if you're going to add the wine and the dancing, this is a great diet, or just do the wine and the dancing, one of the two there. But this is a step up from what I think we think of as the American regime. And then this is the whole food plant-based diet pyramid, which is really based around, the least amount of processing with the most amount of vegetables that you can get. And this really, what you don't see here is you don't see any animal proteins at all. There are no eggs, there's no cheeses, no milk, no dairy products, no meat products at all. And so this is currently gaining a lot of traction as well. So when you think about overall diets, how impactful is it? Well, here's a study from 2013 from the New England Journal of Medicine. They seem reputable, that show that if the primary endpoints of heart attacks, strokes, and death from a cardiovascular cause, there's clearly a difference between the standard American diet and the Mediterranean diet. So I think that we know that our dietary choices are impactful. But I want to share this with you because I think you're going to this blows my mind. So if you're eating the American standard diet, mac, cheese, French fries, hamburgers, yada, yada, the change in coronary artery disease rate is actually positive 20%. If you can try to get toward that Mediterranean diet, you can see a decrease in coronary artery disease rates by 20 to 30%. And if you can somehow find yourself on this plant-based vegetarian diet, you actually decrease your rate of coronary artery disease by 40%, which is pretty impactful. I don't know if you guys are familiar with any of Dean Ornish's studies, but he's got some really nice studies looking at the reversal of atherosclerotic disease in heart attack patients just based on dietary changes alone with a plant-based whole food diet. He's got gorgeous pictures of heart caths that the disease is just no longer in evidence. It's very impactful. So if you're worried about your heart, the diet seems to make a big difference. If you're worried about it, we think so too.
I have a question. Baki.
Hi, Dr. McNab. Could you please comment on the vegan diet, where this vegan diet is standing in terms of the maintaining the healthy lifestyle? Because this thing is just growing quite fast.
Sure.
And then I would like to hear from you. Thank you.
Absolutely. So though this says vegetarian diet, so when you say vegan diet, I think what you're primarily referencing is the whole food plant-based diet. So no cheese, no eggs, no dairy products, vegetables and vegetables alone. And the studies that were done by T. Callan Campbell, if you've ever read his seminal work from the early 80s, the China study, has incredible study results looking at impacts on cancer, looking at impacts on coronary artery disease, looking at arthritis studies. So the vegan diet, the completely non-animal protein diet, has been developing for 30 plus years a tremendous body of knowledge that is extremely impactful. It is super impressive. So I would definitely recommend that to you. And that primarily, I wrote vegetarian here. I'm really describing that vegan diet that you were talking about. And you're right, it is really having its popularity has definitely been ramping up for the past 5-6 years for sure. So American Cancer Society agrees. It thinks that overall diet impacts 20% of cancer diagnoses somehow, some way, whether it's due to obesity, inactivity, the nutrition part of it. So they think that there is a correlation there as well.
Dr. McNab,
so
we have another question. Shelley?
Hi, Dr. McNab. Thanks for doing this. We really appreciate it. The question I have is just really still addressing food and obesity, because I think, and I could be wrong, that childhood obesity is obviously a concern, and something that I kind of wonder is that is there a higher need for addressing it at that level than what we're seeing in order to prevent some of the things that you're discussing as adults?
Sure. So I think, and please remember, I am not a pediatrician, so I should not be mistaken for one, and never send your children to me ever, because I won't see them. But having said that, I think that it's pretty well documented that if you do not correct childhood obesity by the age of like 12 or something like that, that there's somewhere between a 30 and 50% chance that overweight issues and just morbid obesity are going to be a life consequence of that for those children. So I think it's incredibly impactful that, if your child has an obesity issue or an overweight issue, that you address it in real time. I don't think that you can wait and say, well, as an adult, they'll grow out of it, or, oh, they'll figure it out as they go. It can be extremely, extremely hard to help them. And also, if your children are obese, dysmetabolic syndrome does not care whether you're 10 or 20 or 40 or 50. So there's a real upswelling of young 20-year-olds who have diseases like a 40 or 50-year-old do. And if you think about that, the overall quality of their life as they're trying to be 20 and discover who they are and invent themselves and deal with diabetes and neuropathy and, I've got retinal eye disease or impotence or, those are tremendous detractors from their overall health. And at a society level, when we're inventing a large cohort of very young adults who are suffering from significant disease processes, when they should be entering the most productive parts of their life, that's going to have a real impact on our society. Because, when I retire, I'm going to want somebody working behind me to make sure that Social Security is still there. If all the 20-year-olds get to 30 and are all out on disability permanently, wow, this machine does not work very well. That's a little bit scary. So
Dr.
Yes.
Wolf.
Yeah, I was interested in this as well. I'm going to follow up on that a little bit. So among the things that strikes me as interesting is it's pretty hard to have an impact on a single person in a family. I mean, when you talk to the husband and the wife doesn't necessarily want to eat what he's wanting to eat, or is trying to tell her he should eat, and probably the kids are even less interested. I mean, if you saw the Jamie Oliver show where he tried to change the diet in the schools in West Virginia or wherever it was and failed miserably because the kids refused to eat the kinds of healthy food that he wanted them to eat. And it seems to me that it goes on even beyond that. I mean, because when you're dealing with people like this, their whole social structure, I mean, in Wisconsin, I mean, the thing to do is sit on a bar stool and drink and smoke and bitch about how how bad your life is and stuff like that. So it seems to me, and I've been involved with people trying to do this for a long time, that there is a huge momentum going against you. And I guess the ultimate question is, how do you actually get people motivated to change?
Sure.
I don't think education is enough.
Yeah, well, it's not. People are not dying from lack of education. They're lacking in motivation and inspiration. And so, I think that an interesting model of how human beings' brains work and how we make decisions are as follows. We make emotional decisions and then we attach rationality to that. And I think we've all seen that model where, the elephant has a tiny little guy sitting on him, and the elephant represents our emotional response to things, and our intellect is that little bitty guy who's just doing his darndest to try and turn that darn elephant the way that they want him to. And I think that seems right to me. And if you agree with that, then this is not an educational process as much as it is an inspirational one. And what I mean by that is, and I really think that if there's a lot of doctors in the room, or if there's a lot of young student doctors in the room, I think the take-home point is this: when you engage in a good relationship with your patients, and they enjoy your interaction, and they respect you, and they like you, then they're more likely to listen to you, and they're more likely to be open because they're open to you, and because they're open to you, they're open to your advice. And so, I stand here before you guys, and I'm hoping to bank on the fact that I've got a pretty good reputation in this community, and the things that I'm advertising to you guys are the things that I do. I am, every single recommendation that you'll see here in this talk are things that I do above and beyond what I ask my patients to do. And so it's not a do as I say, not as I do model, because we know that's ineffective. But when my patients show up and they say, man, you're in good shape, and how old are you? Because I thought you were maybe like 20 years younger. How'd you do that? I tell them, here's what you need to do. It's not as hard as you think. And that starts the process. But I do also want to completely agree with Dr. Wolf that, most of the time, a lifestyle, unless you're living on an island by yourself, is not something that happens in a vacuum. And if you think that you can have a really healthy lifestyle while living in a really dysfunctional environment with people that only eat at Taco Bell, well, that's pretty fraught with fraudiness and probably not very likely. And so the reason why this works for me is that, my wife and my family, are on this health journey with me. We eat all the same foods. My wife has my workout routine, because she's my training partner. We go to bed at the same time each night. We do everything together, and it works because it's self-reinforcing. On the days when I don't want to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go to the gym, she helps me, and in return, on her tired days, I help her too. So you have to get a lot of buy-in from your loved ones and the people that are important to you. But as the physician trying to crack that nut, I'm telling you, you need to invest in being a good role model and then winning the hearts of your patients, because at the end of the day, if they admire you, they're going to want to emulate you. And that's the only magic that I have to offer you on how to slowly change that. Hope that was helpful. So I do want to switch gears a little bit, talk a little bit about sleeping. So sleep is something that I think Americans do less and less of. We're pretty poor at it. We deprioritize it, and it comes at a tremendous cost to us. So this is from a 2000 study from the journal called Sleep. So that sounds like a reputable resource. If these people don't know anything about sleep, then I think we're in trouble. So what this study shows is, and I'll just show you the graph, that here's about 7 hours of sleep per night. If you're getting significantly more sleep, mortality goes up. If you're getting a lot less than that, your mortality goes up. So, it's important to get the right amount of sleep. So a decrease in sleep duration, below that 6 or 7 hours leads to an associated 110% increase excess risk of cardiovascular mortality. And for those of you who just don't want to get out of bed at 8, 9, 10 hours, it's 110% increased excess mortality for non-cardiovascular mortality, which I'm not sure I can pull from my mind what this included. So I'm not sure anymore. It's been a while since I read this study. My point here is that sleep is important, but the right amount of sleep is the most important thing. You don't want too little, and you certainly don't want too much either, but you need to prioritize that you're getting quality sleep. I think that's kind of the key message here. So here's my prescription for that. 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night is what I do. I engage heavily in sleep hygiene. I don't know about you guys, but I love like this Headspace sleep casts, which have somebody tell you a bedtime story in a really soothing voice, kind of like mine. You guys are probably asleep right now. And then occasionally I'll use a little melatonin if I need it. I don't use any other sleep aids. And to be honest with you, if I take melatonin, I have these really incredible, just very realistic dreams. So I don't know if I'm taking the melatonin because I just like crazy dreams or if it really helps me sleep sometimes. And what would I recommend to my patients? The same thing. What you don't want to engage in is narcotizing your patients to help them sleep. So if you can avoid benzodiazepines, especially chronically, any of the Benadryl, antihistamines, when you become chemically dependent on medicines to help you sleep, wow, you've really kind of screwed up some really fundamental systems in your body. And then that becomes an ever increasing game of, I need more because I'm become tolerant. And then, of course, side effects climb in. So engaging in a good sleep hygiene regime is kind of key. All right. Tobacco. I love this. In the United States, smoking tobacco, it's still the only legal method to be killed. And I think that to the greater degree, I think that's probably true. Probably motorcycles are probably on there too. So, I think we know smoking kills a lot of people. I think this audience is very well educated on that. So I don't think that we need to talk about that too much. I did throw this up here for just some of the things that you might not. When I think about smoking and I talk to my patients, they're aware of heart attacks and strokes, they're aware of cancer, they're aware of COPD, but they normally don't make the association of macular degeneration and how terrible it is to be blind when you're old. They don't know that they're increasing the risk of diabetes or ectopic pregnancies for all our younger female patients. Erectile dysfunction, I love to just wax poetic about erectile dysfunction to all my male patients. I think that really gets their attention a little bit sometimes. And even worsens liver disease as well. I don't think there's an organ system that is not negatively impacted by smoking, to be honest with you. So I like to point out some of the devil in the details things. So back to the InterHeart study. So looking back at the InterHeart study, as you guys remember, that's a 52-country study looking at modifiable risk factors. They really felt like out of control cholesterol and smoking really accounted for about 66% of all heart attacks acutely worldwide, and that if you can get people to reduce smoking, you're going to get major benefit from that. So cutting smoking in half cuts your risk in half. But for those of your patients who say, well, I'm only smoking 1 or 2 cigarettes a day, still it is increasing your acute myocardial risk by about 40%. There is no safe number of cigarettes to smoke per day. The risk is built in, and if you smoke any, you assume the risk. So there you go. And if you're only smoking 1-5 cigarettes a day and you're doing some other really good things, you might actually be canceling out the benefits of an otherwise pretty healthy lifestyle. And why would you want to come so far and then fail because of something like that? So I do think that, it's important that patients know that. I want to talk about this study for a minute. Hopefully some of you are aware of this, the Harvard Adult Development Study. This is a study that's been going on somewhere between 80 and 100 years. And basically they took a cohort of very young men around the area of Harvard, and they just followed them and their families through their entire lifespan. So it's been going on a long time. And what they were looking for was the correlatives to longer lifespan. And what they found was the thing that was strongest in predicting whether you were going to have a long life was good, healthy social relationships. So if you invested heavily in a network of friends and family, your relationship with your spouse and your community are rock solid, whether you had wealth or poverty, what have you, that was the one thing that really was the most impactful, according to 80 years of staring at these people and their families. So pretty cool. And I think that it overlaps pretty well with the InterHeart study that said, hey, when you don't address psychosocial issues, cardiovascular risk goes up. And I just don't think that we focus in on that near enough because it's uncomfortable. A lot of times our patients don't want to deal with it. And we're just there to sell them some Plavix and some beta blockers and send them on their way with a really expensive stent. And we've left the door wide open for more problems. So we got to remember we're osteopathic physicians. We have a holistic philosophy for a reason. And this is a major puzzle piece that your patients can't afford for you to leave it unaddressed. All right, so let's do a little bit of a recap here. Healthy lifestyle, which means moderate activity, trying to give yourself the best diet, which really means the leanest amount, lowest amounts of animal proteins, and try and get the rest in non-processed foods. A goodly amount of sleep. Protect yourself from obesity. Get your blood pressure and cholesterol under control. Don't smoke. Have good relationships. This pile, of which, by the way, most of this costs you nothing except for maybe you got to buy food. That's the only thing here that costs you anything at all. Is going to outperform my ability to sell you these 75 prescription medications tremendously. I just can't out-medicate a toxic lifestyle. So this is what real healthcare is, not sick care, not palliative care. If you can do these things, then you have a real opportunity to decrease your cardiovascular risk by 90 to 95%. That is amazing when we're talking about 2.6 million unnecessary deaths per year. That's pretty impactful. So, and just to kind of wrap it up in a personal manner, you know, I don't just talk it, I walk it. So, you know, this is my A1C. And so for those of you who don't know, A1C is a 3-month average of blood sugars. And as it goes up, your insulin resistance is going up. And you can see I was like about one toe over the line a couple years ago and said, oh God, diabetes will not be my fate. And just with lifestyle modifications, I was able to bring that down to a very healthy and normal. And in fact, I've had some since then have gone back down to 4.6. So I don't need my doctor to sell me prescriptions. Though one of them did try and sell me a prescription for, I want to say, an SGLT2, which was only going to cost me $500 a month. So I said no to that and said yes to better food and a little exercise. And so I was able to correct my insulin resistance. And then about a year ago, hubris got me, and because my father had heart attacks in his 40s and I'm almost 50, I let my doctor talk me into a coronary calcium score, which I only did because in my arrogant way, I knew I would pass it with flying colors, which I did not. So for those of you who don't know about coronary calcium tests, what you want is a 0, which means that you have no atherosclerotic back pain at all, and your overall risk of heart disease is about 0. Mine was higher than that. It wasn't god awful, but it was higher than that. And so next thing I knew, I found myself on a treadmill stress test, which I did great with. So don't worry that I'm going to pass away during this lecture. But it angered me enough to come back and look at this cholesterol and ask the question, is this cholesterol panel good enough? And I think if you guys remember back to that slide, looking at increasing mortalities with increasing in cholesterol levels, the answer is no. And so based on this and that calcium score on my testing, I changed over in December to a complete vegan diet. And within 3 weeks, and I want you to look at this, in 3 weeks, this was my cholesterol. Total is 100. My LDL, my bad cholesterol, is now 42. And let me tell you a thing about LDL. When we look at studies with patients that can get their LDLs down to 70 or less, we're able to document with intravascular ultrasound that atherosclerotic coronary artery disease regresses and goes away. So whatever my calcium score was last year, I'm thinking in about a year I'm going to go back and I want to see it again, because my hope is that with this 42, it is either unchanged or even better, has it actually regressed. So that's all done just with the diet alone. So in short, I think that whether the people in the room are training doctors or whether they are doctors or whether you are a student doctor becoming a doctor, or if you're just a human being or have loved ones, then I think that we need to start to agree that pursuing healthcare, which is really all about lifestyle, is the most important thing that we can be engaging in. And we need to start to shift away from what really is disease management, which still is critically important, but it's so late into the process to start a healthcare conversation that we've got to do a better job. And with that, unless I've exhausted y'all and you don't have any, if there's any further questions, I'd say heap them on and let's do it.
Any questions for Dr. McNab? I think you've answered a lot of questions throughout this talk, and I'd just like to make a comment. Oh, okay. Jordan has a question. Jordan, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wanting to thank you for this talk. It was great. But also, just to pick your brain, obviously, we don't want you to solve all the world's problems right now. But with sort of what we're seeing in healthcare and the idea of inequality based on your socioeconomical and cultural identity, how you see implementing this sort of healthcare across all of the strata equally, so that it's not just the people who can afford the kind of doctors that want to engage in this sort of thing.
I just to pick your brain as far as that kind of thing.
Oh, sure. I think that that's kind of part of the larger question right now that I think that we're struggling with, maybe just in this country, maybe worldwide. How do we treat ourselves, not just as human beings, but as good human beings? And how do we recognize a human being when we see one? I think that that's a difficult issue with a lot of history with it. I think that for myself, I help every way that I can, and I think that, the biggest thing that I'm trying to teach myself is I spent a lot of time being, quietly thoughtful about what my value system was. And I don't like to be hassled by people, and normally when I would get to places where there would be conversations going on, mostly the viewpoints that were being espoused loudly were, they just were really not my viewpoints, and I really didn't want to be part of the conversation. And I've, in my 50s, now I've come to the idea that, well, because no one stepped up and said, well, that ain't right. I don't think that that's the way you think it is, and I don't see it that way, and maybe we need to rethink this. I think that my major failing in life has been that I could have been a better advocate for those who really needed one in society. Because I think that when enough people step up in either places of respect or authority and say, my opinion is such and such and such, and you're entitled to yours, but I think that these are the value systems that this society should have, and here's how we should take care of each other because it's the right thing to do. Then the people that were like me before, who also thought those things, but were just too quiet to say it, they're going to start to be braver, and they're going to step up and add to that, like a snowball going down a hill, until people look up and recognize, oh yeah, we all do have a similar value system, and we are all willing to make changes for everybody. And otherwise, what you hear is kind of what I call the lunatic fringe, who are really loud, really can dominate a conversation if you let them. So, and I think that that's maybe like I don't know what the quote is, for evil to happen, all you need is for a bunch of really good people to do nothing. And I really think that if that's the gist of your question, then I think that being a good example, and then at least being, if not loud, then at least like vocal about what your value systems really are, so that people can know that there are other viewpoints out there, and then be able to maybe sup off of your bravery and start to do something themselves. And I think if more people did that, I think we'd start to be able to really understand what we want as a society. Anyway, a little off topic, but you asked, I told.
Ashkan Nazadi, good to see you, man. You got a question?
You let that guy in the room?
Good to see you. Hey, thanks, Dr. McNab, for the talk. I just had it wasn't even really a question, but is there a way we can get a copy of the PowerPoint as like a PDF, just so I can share with my wife or anyone?
Absolutely.
I can distribute that.
How about I just give the whole thing to Dr. Staudinger and anybody who wants, and that just goes without saying, guys, if you ever see any of my presentations, if you want them, they're for you. Do with them what you will. That's why I made them. I made them for you.
They're your voice. Okay. I don't see any more questions. What I'd like to say, I don't see enough of you, Dr. McNab. I like to surround myself with positive people, and you're one that I really enjoy being around. There's another thing I'd like to say, and you're living proof that in the genes versus environment discussion, you can outrun your genes. As I understand it, though, it's a lot of work. And you're very inspiring. And I will endeavor to say, with respect to rhythm and guitar playing, you can also improve that with a lot of work.
Be gentle. I drum to my own beat. What can I tell you? I'm always a drummer myself.
You do march to the beat of your own drummer, and that's yet another thing I appreciate about you. So, student doctors and everybody left in the room, if we could unmute collectively and thank our guest speaker loudly and profusely for such a wonderful talk. So thank you so much. Quickly, I'm going to throw it to Shelley to promote other talks coming. And I would mention here that Dr. McNab has agreed to give another talk later next month. And so stay tuned for that.
Thank you, Dr. Staudinger, and thank you again, Dr. McNab. We really do appreciate all that you do for KCU, and we miss your presence at the MKRC. So thank you again for that. Everybody, please tune in tomorrow at 1 p.m. for our COVID-19 Journal Club. Stephanie Bates, student Dr. Stephanie Bates, will be giving a talk on socioeconomic